The gain is switching it around because I started off with 0, but I actually gained 7. So from that point of view, I should be happy. And I will be happy because I started off with nothing and now I've got 7. Sure, I was shooting for 10. I didn't get there, but I got 7. And that's the gain. Hey Shane, how's it going?
Good, man. How you doing?
Good. I'm doing splendid, actually.
Splendid.
Doing very well. Splendid.
That's a great word. Splendid.
For today's chat, I'd like to talk about a book that I'm actually reading or listening to. It's probably a more accurate assessment. And the book is called The Gap and the Gain, and it's by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Harvey, if you can see that there.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, it's a book that I started because you'd actually mentioned it in one of our podcast episodes. And so I thought, you know what? Shane's read this book. It must be a pretty good book. So I better listen to it. Only to find out now that you actually haven't read the book.
No, it's not. Yeah.
And I'm on my second listen. But I have to say, it's an excellent book. And going through the reviews on Audible, everybody says it's a happiness book. So I'm going to dub our podcast episode today the happiness episode, and we'll base it off this gap and the gain. So basically, the entire book, it's actually not a very long book, but the gap and the gain talks about two different things and the effects that those two different things affect us. It's probably a better way to talk about it. So at its very most simplest explanation, if I want to achieve 10, it could be 10 of anything. And if my goal is to achieve 10 and I can only get 7, that means that there's 3 remaining. And there's a gap there. And that means for most people that you feel a little bit disappointed. You could feel a bit angry because, you tried to do something and you just didn't quite get there. And overall, you could feel pretty shitty. So that's represented by the term the gap. Now, the gain is switching it around because I started off with 0, but I actually gained 7. So from that point of view, I should be happy. And I will be happy because I started off with nothing and now I've got 7. Sure, I was shooting for 10. I didn't get there, but I got 7. And that's the gain. And that's pretty much the entire book. It's a way of thinking differently. It's thinking backwards is what it is. It's not so much thinking forward and saying, okay, well, this is my goal, and if I don't get it, I'm going to be disappointed. I'm going to be angry, and all of this effort might not get the goal that I want. That's thinking forward. But then if you think it back, you go, okay, well, sure, you might not have gotten there, but where did you start from, and where did you end up? And if people thought that way, they would actually go, well, you know what, you're right. I tried as best as I can, and sure, I might not have achieved what it is that I actually wanted to achieve, but I got close. I'm getting closer. And you know what? If I give it another shot, I could probably actually get there, if not even go beyond that. And so the book explains that in quite a lot of detail. And I can see how many people that read this book turn around and say, this is basically just a happiness book. This is a way to tell people to think about their achievements, not think about their failures or their shortcomings, which I think in modern society with social media, with people showing what they've bought and how much money they've got, literally 99.9% of people are going to fall short. I want to buy a car. Hey, there's a guy with a Lambo. I want a Lambo. Oh, I can't afford a Lambo. All I can afford is a Hyundai or a Honda or a Nissan. But then what did you have before that? Well, I didn't. It's my first car. Well,
Yeah.
there's a gain. There's a gain there. Be happy about that. You've got a car. You didn't have one. Sure, it's not a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or, a McLaren, but it's a car. And turning that thinking around, it does actually make you a lot happier. You look at people that are gifted artistically, that can draw things, and it's on Instagram all the time. People that, here's the stencil of somebody's face, and after 10 or 20 seconds, it's realistic, and it's realistic through the use of some pencils and some textures and some tricky filming, and it's awesome. And you think to yourself, I'm going to try and do that. So you learn for a bit, you study, you copy, and you try and draw as best as you can, and you try to get to that level of imagery and artistry, and you might not get there. And so you go to yourself, well, I've studied for so long and I still can't draw as good as this person can.
Yeah.
And there's the gap. There's a huge gap there. But then if you ask yourself, well, 6 months before I couldn't draw anything, but now I can draw pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's where you're like, wow, okay, I should be proud of myself. So, even though the book, it is a lot more than that, but that's the initial thought, and me trying to get beyond that definition is difficult, because for me, it was actually quite profound. It's not like it's a small thing to just read about and then continue the rest of the book, because basically the book introduces that concept very early on in, and then the book spends the rest of the time justifying it and putting it in examples and all this sort of stuff. But I was hooked from like the first paragraph. I'm like, oh, this is like such a revelation, And so in my head, I'm thinking about all of these times that that had I used that method, I would have been much happier. Trying to get jobs, trying to do things with cars, trying to, things with friends, things where I may have fallen short. Tiny bit short, really short, I'm not really sure. But it's the effort that I put into it, and the outcome that I got wasn't what I desired. And I'm like, oh, you know what? If only I did this, and I was down on myself. But then turning it around, it's like, well, where did I start from? I started from this position and now I'm here. I should be proud of that. And after listening to the book, and this is probably my second time through, I'm starting to appreciate all of the things that I'm doing now. It's a bit hard to do it for things that are down the track, but now, you and I are coaches, and we're both wanting to grow our coaching business. And sometimes I'm like, I want so many clients. Like, why? Like, where are the clients? Even though I've literally just learned coaching minutes ago. Like, where are they all? Like, where are their emails? And then I have to stop and go, wait a minute. Sure. Like, there's only a couple of people. Actually, there's a number of people that want to practice, which is great. But I'd like more. But then, as a coach, what was I doing a couple of months ago? I wasn't even a coach. And from that point to where I am now, I'm super happy with my progress, and I love it. I love coaching about all of it. Yeah. And so there are times when, people will want to do these, marketing campaigns, thinking so many people are going to come in and I'm going to have all this business and I'm going to make all this money, only for it to fail. And sure, that sucks. And there is that gap there. But then the gain is, well, you've learned a bit about marketing. You learnt about, what might not be effective. So don't do that again. You've learned something there. You've probably jumped over a big hurdle. You've probably gone outside of your comfort zone to do this particular sort of marketing. So next time you do it again, you're going to be more confident. There are these things that people don't realize that they have learned, during these sorts of exercises and phases where people feel like they've failed. They have to go back and revisit it and go, you know what? In doing this, I learned this and I learned that and I learned this. So next time I do it, I'm not going to repeat those. I'm going to do it something different. I'm going to have, more passion. I'm going to have more energy for it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, then you can still go back and go, well, I learned this as well. So the third and the fourth and the fifth time I do something, it's going to be a bit different.
Yeah. Like every time there's a little bit of progress, isn't there? It kind of reminds me of the, when you were talking, I was thinking about this thing of shoot for the stars and you'll hit the moon. I think that's how the saying goes, something like that. And it reminded me of the, space program, back in the early 60s, I think it was, when JFK said, by the end of the decade, we're going to put man on the moon. And regardless of whether you think we went there or not, I mean, that's another topic, right?
I wasn't going to go there, but that's fine.
But the intention was by the end of the decade to get there. So he set a clear goal, within, it was less than 10 years, I think it was, that they had to achieve this goal. And, the first thing was to design a rocket, get the thing off the launch pad, So many times they failed. I don't know exactly how many times they failed, but there was a lot, probably dozens of times. And that's a lot of money, a lot of time spent to just get the thing off the launch pad, and we're talking about leaving the Earth's atmosphere and going to another planet, And so they finally got there, but, it was kind of this, I think, for them to get to the moon was kind of aiming further than that, for them to try and hit this. And I'm sure there were times where they went, I don't think this is going to happen, even probably up until months before this was going to take place. In fact, I've heard interviews where they believed that wasn't going to happen. And this is years and years afterwards, after the fact. But I suppose there would have been somebody in their ranks that said, look, guys, look at what we've done, how far we've got. We've been able to, build a rocket. We've been able to get into the atmosphere, stratosphere, and been able to bring people or astronauts back safely home. So the next step is going a bit further every time. That kind of relates closely as well. I remember when I was building my car. Now, it wasn't going to the moon, but it kind of felt like it was, because I was not a mechanic in any way, stretch, or form, but my dad was, and he'd been long gone. But it was kind of like, I want to do that. And so I bought a car that was a rolling shell, probably the worst scenario you could have. And bit by bit, I had an old, call it Gregory's book.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you recall it, but
I remember those.
it was probably about 200 pages in this thing, and everything that you wanted to know about your car, you go through it. So I knew nothing about cars before I started, and built the thing. It took me 7.5 years. That wasn't only because I didn't know what I was doing, but it was kind of learning as you go. Make so many mistakes, go back into it, kick the car, swear a bit more, then come back a week later and continue on, And so many times I thought, I'm never going to finish this thing, and so many times I thought, I just want to sell it. I'm so sick and tired of doing this, and I'm done, but it, when you bring it back to perspective and you see how far you've kind of come, you've come way past halfway, you may as well see it through, and that's what kept me going. And the thought of, I can't keep going to those car club meets with that, with a Commodore when you've got, a muscle car Tirana waiting to go on the road. And so it was just that thought of having to have this thing finished, regardless of whether I liked it or not. Now I've made the commitment to do it, keep going, just one step at a time, get it done.
Exactly.
That was a real gap there. And, but I had to keep looking back and going, yeah, but we've done all of this. We've learnt all of these steps, and that help me help other people work on their cars as well.
Bloody cars, hey. Gotta love them, gotta hate
Bloody
them.
cars.
I got to tell you, your story just then just triggered a really good, not memory, but a really good statement in my head. And it was a video that I recorded on another channel, my channel called the Decaf Network. And I made a quick video saying how I was always a destination guy. I wanted to get to the destination as quickly as I could, the least hassle, the easiest way, how probably most Gen Zers are today, maybe. I wanted the instant thrill. And I was like that for a very long time. I wanted the coolest cars. I just wanted to have one of the biggest house. I think, most people at some point in their life go through that stretch. And as I've become older, I've realized that I'm actually more of a journey guy, more for going through the thing that leads me to getting that thing that I want, if I get that thing I want. And when you were talking about building your car, that's what I thought. I thought, wait a minute, this gap in the game is basically the same as journey versus destination. And you and I have been in cars for pretty much the same amount of time, and I knew so many people that would spend thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars on their car, only for it to be finished and then sold within 3 months of it completing. But the entire car, it may represent years and years of development, different car, different wheels, suspension, and interior, and paint jobs, and all of this stuff. And then once the car's finished, they sell it.
Yeah.
And I knew one person that did that, and then I knew another, and then another, and then another. And I actually asked one of them at some point. I said, you guys spend all this money and all this time. Some of it was sweat equity as well. So some of it was just them tinkering on it. Others would spend like large amounts of cash. But at the end of the day, it's still time. It's still, a resource that isn't useful to them because it's in bits and pieces or it's in the shop. And when I asked him, he said, it's all about the journey. It's like building, having a vision for something, putting resources behind it, whether it's time, money, your own abilities, other people's, that sort of stuff. And using all that. And once you've achieved that goal of what you had in your head and it's in there in front of you, in the metal and rubber and carbon fiber and all that sort of stuff, you appreciate it, but you actually appreciate it for what it allowed you to do. You might have made some friends through it. You might have learnt some things about cars. You might have, decided to start a new career, as I know a lot of people did, tinkering on cars. And at the time of them telling me that, it still didn't click. It only clicked for me a couple of years ago, where I was in the position to acquire certain things that I'd always wanted, and some I had acquired immediately, and these aren't big expensive things by any means. They're just things that I wanted. Some things I acquired quickly. Other things took me a while to acquire. I had to wait. I had to overcome some obstacles and organize postage and just contact strangers. And I hope this guy does the right thing by me. And what I realized was that the objects that were harder to get, I actually appreciated them more, even though I liked both of these things equally. The one that I wanted that was easy to get, great, I've got it. I love it. It's fine. But the other one that was much harder to get, that took a different path, took ultimately 10 times as long. And at one point, I didn't even think it was going to arrive. When it did, I've gone, oh, this is the best thing. Yeah. And they're literally the same thing.
Yeah.
And I started to think about all of the things that were similar like that in my life, and basically came to the conclusion that I kind of was always a journey guy to begin with. And this is what the gap and the gain is, essentially. The gain is the journey, and the gap is kind of like the destination. And some people might not ever fill that gap in because they might find that the gain itself was all of the reward that they needed, and so it's a way to find happiness in what you've achieved rather than the thing that you haven't achieved. And I'm proud to say now that I fully am a journeyman in all of this sort of stuff. If my coaching aspirations are a third of what is in my head, I'll still be grateful for that because I started from nothing, from being not even a coach. If my goal is, I don't know, 50 clients and I achieve 10 initially, and I'm not saying that the gap is never going to not go away, but sometimes I'll go, wait, I've got 10. That guy over there's got 100. Like, why can't I get another 20 to get 30? That'll come and go. But the moment I can kind of twist it around and go, but you know what? I've got 10 and these 10 are great. And I love being able to help them, and it teaches me be a better coach as well. And from that 10, I'll eventually get that other 20. And then after I get that 30, I'll get another 30, and I'll get more, and I'll get better. And, it is just a different way to think of things. And it's funny how we always try to compare ourselves against something that may or may not be achievable, in certain circumstances, in probably most circumstances as well. Whatever it is that we're trying to achieve is so far out of our league that it's a little bit murky in terms of, hey, here's a guy that's 22 years old and he's driving a Ferrari, or he's invested in Bitcoin and he's worth $1 million, or he's dating this, this model person, all of these different things that we see in social media, in news, our friend tells us, it's on TV, and we think, oh, if they can do it, we can do it as well. And I'm not saying that it can't be done, but what I'm saying is, to get that exact same result, it might not happen. You might get a quarter of the way there, you might get halfway there, you might get a substitute, you might get something entirely different, but not that exact result. But then if you think of what it is that you've achieved, or that you've gotten, and that you've earned, and that you're now, I don't know, you're friends with, you're friends with that particular person, you might find that you're completely missing something because you're so focused on a goal that is either unrealistic, or because you've not achieved that exact specific thing, you actually miss out on what it is that you've gained. And what it is you've gained is, it's probably as good, if not better, than the actual goal that you've set out to achieve. So for me, I'm learning to love the journey more of coaching. Sure, there are times when I'll be in the shower and dreaming about giving keynote presentations and all of this sort of stuff, and having a huge online community that comes and goes. And I'm loving working towards it. But I'm now more aware of all of the little steps that I need to take in order for that to happen. And I'm what's that saying? Stop and smell the roses. I'm doing that a bit more often because, like I said, for the longest time, I've just wanted this. I've just wanted the end game straight away. And it's funny. I remember listening to a Rogan podcast. This was years and years ago, and I think it was Steve Tyler. He's the Aerosmith guy, right? The lead singer.
Yeah.
I think it was him. And Rogan was interviewing him, and he was saying that he was going back on tour. Now, this was, I'd probably say, 10 years ago. So, like Aerosmith are still a very old band. But he was saying he was going back on tour because his wife wanted a new house. Yeah. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, okay, well, if someone like Steve Tyler, who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, needs to go on tour because his wife, like, he's never going to get to the end game. It's just constantly going to, So it really taught me to think about how far I've come. All of these little steps that I need to endure and get through. Now, if I don't get the goal, it doesn't matter. But those little steps are what makes me me, and what makes me appreciate the stuff that I've done for myself and for other people, and to keep on going.
Yeah. That thing with Steve Tyler, it reminded me of there was something that John Lennon said, and I think this was around the time. It was after he left the Beatles, and that was just him and Yoko. And he said something about Yoko wanted a pool or something like that, and all I have to do is write another song, that kind of thing. But the way he said it was like the music. He loves doing the music, but because he is so a part of the process, he loves that process of the creation. That's an easy thing. Oh, you want to get a pool or another house or get another car? I'll just produce it through my creativity, And I remember hearing a little while ago this thing too of loving the process. And I was very much goals-oriented person when I was younger. Even with the car, it was kind of like, just got to get there with it, get it finished. And 7.5 years or whatever was quite long enough. But long before I bought the car, I used to spend my weekends driving into the country, spending 2 or 3 hours driving somewhere just to go and have a look at this car in someone's barn, and it was a bit like the, American pickers. They go into all these barns and find these amazing, treasures. And for me, it was like that. I had this thing in my mind, like, looking in back then we had the Trading Post, the paper. We had paper back there, back then, and the ads in there. And I'd ring up. I'd spend my whole weekend just going and having a look at these things like a treasure hunt. And that thing about loving the process, I absolutely loved that. It was kind of finding the jewel. And later on, I guess when I looked at it again with the car, the process itself was the thing. And that's true, even though the end goal is to create this finished product with your car mates, they've realized that they love the process of building. It's not really just to get to the end goal. Yes, they can stand back and look at it and say, look at this, it's magnificent, what I've done. But now it's time to kind of get that feeling, the enjoyment out of, finding the pieces, putting them together, just having a look at each piece like it's a piece of artwork, I guess, that's their creativity. And sometimes I think we lose that perspective, and it's all about perspective, really. We lose that perspective because I've renovated homes before, and you were saying how people work really hard and they finish it off and then they sell it. That was me with houses, just get the thing renovated. We lived in it, maybe a house for 5 or 10 years, and it was only within the last couple of years that we really loved it, finished it off and then sold the thing. And so it became someone else's enjoyment. I can't say I loved the process at that time, to be honest. It was about getting it finished. But looking back now, you can take those lessons. How do you fall in love with the process more? Is the process the thing that you're enjoying or hating doing? Maybe you shouldn't be doing it then. What's the reason you're doing it? Usually, I shouldn't say usually, but a majority of the times, I think sometimes it's more a monetary goal than anything. I know for me anyway, it has been a lot of other guys I've spoken to as well. There's some sort of monetary gain from it with the buying and selling houses. That's definitely what it was, flipping homes in a way. But I think, I watch a lot of shows, renovation shows, that sort of thing. They seem to love the process of it. People that do this for a living, um, they get a lot of money from it, from flipping it. They get the satisfaction from doing it. But the process itself, they love the creativity of it, designing the house, renovating it, whether they're getting their hands dirty or whether it's their team. There's this thing that they get some real enjoyment out of taking something that is old and decrepit and polishing the thing up. So I can only imagine they love the process, and it looks like they do. But on other shows, contrasting, like The Block, I've seen people that haven't really enjoyed the process, and certainly that's happened to me as well, so it's really keeping that perspective, like the end goal isn't the goal, or isn't the only goal. If the process is the goal, that really means that you've changed what's important. It's not important just to get to the end, but enjoy every step of the journey.
Yeah. You know what? You answered a question that you didn't know I was asking within the third word of what you were talking about just then. I know I kind of dubbed this the happiness episode, and it still kind of is. And what I realized in you talking, and it was hard for me I was listening to you, don't get me wrong, but I didn't want to lose this train of thought. I didn't want to write it down either. I can't find a pen nearby. But luckily you said the word 3 or 4 times. And for me, happiness and this journey and the gain, for me, all comes down to creativity. You said it a number of times, and of the times that you said it, it hit the same time. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's it. I remember doing some values with the coaching course that I did. And one of the things that I valued most, number 1 was happiness. And number 2, which in hindsight now is potentially the same thing, was creativity. And that's not like creativity in making something beautiful or anything like that. It's just having the freedom to build and to create something, whether it's a process, whether it's a car, whether it's being creative within yourself to be a bit more out there, doing what we're doing, being out on camera. It's building something, and I value that so much. And that's what the journey is for me, is building. It's creativity. It is the gain. The gain is essentially creativity, because even if you have instructions on how to build something, you do it, but almost always you do it in your way. Even if it's written down, you just follow this to a T. Everybody seems to go, okay, well, I'll start doing it this way, but you know what? I can do it a bit differently. I want to put my own spin on things. I want to do it this way, or there's an easy way to do this, or a better way, or a funner way, or, and I value that a lot. Like I said, it's probably my, if not my top value, it'd be my second most top value is creativity, and having the freedom to do, not so much do what I want, but to do things that I know can help others, that keeps me entertained, that keeps me curious, that keeps me wondering. And that basically sums up everything for me, is that journey. The journey to see what it is that I do like, because the journey doesn't have to be all positive. In fact, for many, the journey could be hell, right? But it's not until you've gotten past that section of the journey that you can actually go back and look at it and find the gain in that potentially bad journey. Because, it could be a divorce, a separation, a death, something to do with your work, something to do with a financial struggle, which is all seen as negative. but there's always the gain component of it. Is the relationship toxic? Does that now give you more time to look inner? Does it now give you that kickstart to find a job? Does it give you a kickstart to skill up, to go back to school? Everyone goes through bad journeys in their life. It's then the bounce back. Like, what do you learn from that? And the gap and the gain is always a positive. It's if it's a bad thing that you're going through, there's always going to be a positive thing as a result, whether it's something to do with mindset, whether it's something to do physically, whether it's something to do with time or resources or whatever it is. There's always something positive to come from it. And for me, that creativity aspect of the gain, of the journey, of learning something, and it could be learning something to not do that again. You know what I mean? It's we always think that learning something is, okay, I'm learning it, therefore I want to do it. But it's as much that as it is learning something to then no longer pursuing it. In a similar way to how I became an employee for 9 months, thinking that might be the answer to certain things in my life that I weren't happy with. And even though that ended, and that journey, the journey for the most part was okay, but it wasn't as I had intended. It was probably seen towards the end as quite negative. But I learned from that. There's a positive spin. What I gained from those 9 months, I can't thank it enough, if you know what I mean. Like, I learned certain things in those 9 months, and I'm like, I'm glad I went through this journey.
Yeah.
Sure, it sucked towards the end and I hated it, but I'm so glad I went through it, because now my values are like etched in stone. I know that I want to do certain things now. I now have a little bit more clarity. I now have a path in life. And ultimately it led to a lot more creativity. Like, I'm now a coach. Had I stuck with it and just gone, you know what, I'm going to try and make this work because I think it's right, I wouldn't be in this situation now. I'd be in an entirely different situation. So it's those sorts of gains there that, in the instance, like in that present moment, I'm thinking this is a terrible position to be in. Like, I don't want to, like, this just sucks. But giving it space now and thinking back, best decision ever. It couldn't have happened at a better time. The result couldn't have been more perfect. And for the 9 months that I went through, I would happily do it again, just for that same feeling and just for that same outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. A few things I gained from that, what you just said. There seems to be the buzzword, gain. So I think if you always keep asking that, what am I gaining from this? What did I gain from that experience? Even if you felt like it was a terrible experience, you'll glean some insight from that. Like, there would have been a lot of experiences, I guess, you had in those 9 months where you said, that's okay, and all of this other stuff, I don't want to do that again. So if you spent 9 months to do that for all of your life, that's kind of like, what they say, fail fast forward, or something like that. Fail fast, basically. And if you're doing something for a long time, you keep doing it and doing it, you're probably not asking yourself those questions. What am I gaining from this experience? And you learn pretty quickly. With creativity too, I see creativity in everything. Like you said, about building a business. A lot of people don't see it that way. A lot of people see music or art, poetry, etc., as creativity. But really, creativity is only bringing into the physical from the invisible. It's a thought in someone's mind that someone has created, because the whole idea of creativity is creation. And so something that's come from your mind, whether it be you like to crunch numbers, but you come up with some sort of amazing mathematical formula that someone else hasn't thought about, or used someone's formula to create something else, that's something you did, so something unique from you where you've built on something else that someone else has said or someone else has thought about, or something that is already created. That's your own unique creation. Anyway, because it got me thinking about when I was at art school, really. And I'd always been fascinated with art and the uniqueness of art. And I remember being there and doing something, and they said, no, you've got to do it this way. And my whole thing was like, but that's not art if I'm copying what you're doing.
Yeah.
All that is a reproduction of what you're doing. So I had a completely different idea about art as what they did, I guess. And it's a side note. but relating it back to what we're talking about is that gap in the gain thing, because I really thought I wanted to be an artist. I certainly still did want to be in the creative field, but not in the way that other people viewed art, because it meant I had to kind of reproduce something that someone else wanted rather than kind of something unique. And so me going through that experience, I gained knowledge about myself, what was kind of more true and aligned with my values, I guess, even though on the surface it looked like the same thing until you actually go into it and experience it for a little while and ask that question. I didn't ask that question, but I guess, I did in some way, and realized it wasn't for me, not the way that someone else wanted it done. So, which put me on a different trajectory, which was a good thing. And I think the gap in the gain, although I haven't read the book, I think prior to hearing that term, it was something that I was doing anyway, and it was about perspective for me. What have you lost, and what have you got gained from it? But it was never put in a concise way, I guess. And just that term, the gap in the gain, is a really nice timeline. Wherever you're standing, you can look forward and see the gap, but you could also look at it and see, what am I gaining from this? What's the experience, And so whether you're looking backwards or forwards, you can ask those same questions, what am I gaining and where's the gap? But even with the gap, keep the perspective of, how much have you achieved and what have you learnt from here,
Yeah. The tagline that most people put on the review of the book in Audible was one of the main, I wouldn't even call it the main line in the book, but it was the one line that most people quoted, and it was always measure backwards. Like, that's what it was. And that's where you were heading, that sort of, that statement is
Yes.
is that,
Nice.
you're at the present moment, measure backwards, measure how, where you were 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and what have you achieved, either in general or specific to a goal that you think you've fallen short from. And in almost every circumstance, you'll never lose. You'll always gain something, a piece of knowledge, a skill. You'll have gained an opinion, some thoughts, a different mindset. And, like I said before, it's not all positive. It doesn't have to be positive. It can actually be more beneficial to learn some negative things, so that not to do that again, or so that you need to pursue something different or change something. It's it's great when you measure backwards and the things that you thought were going to be effective are effective, because you're like, okay, great. But then when you do that and you get the opposite effect, sometimes I think that's even more impactful, because in your head, you've always got this idea of, I'm going to achieve all of this by doing these sorts of things that I think is right, and without any real evidence. But when you actually start to do it and find that those ideas that you had aren't actually coming up to fruition, it's actually more important then to go, wait a minute, I thought that I had all the answers. Now what am I going to do? Like, I have to be a bit resourceful now. I have to do a bit more research. I have to try this and I have to try that. And so you're gaining in twice. You're gaining twice. You're gaining the first time because what you thought was the answer actually isn't. That's the first gain. The second gain is that you got to figure out what it is that will actually get you moving forward. So it's like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work. I thought it was. What am I going to do? You're not going to sit there and do nothing. You're going to go, well, I need this to work. What is it? Do I need to take a course? Do I need to speak to people? Is my marketing message wrong? Like, who do I speak to? And then you're instantly resourceful. So you're gaining twice. So, it is really put simple, like in terms, the gap and the gain, you understand it. But the more you read into it, and we're reading into this now, like probably more than it deserves. But the more I'm digging into it now, the more I'm finding that it's actually quite profound. It's for me, it is a happiness book, but it's a creativity book. It's the fact that these gains are actually twofold. It's the fact that, even if it is just a system to know that I'm on track, because that gain is a positive gain and I expected it, cool. I'll just keep going with what it is that I'm doing.
Yeah.
At the same time, if it's incorrect, that means that now I can try something new. I can be resourceful. I can be creative, and that for me, that feeds me twice as much.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like being proven wrong, because, especially to myself, like in front of other people, not so much. But if I have my own opinions and I try and use them and they don't work, sometimes I'm a little bit excited about that. I'm like, oh, okay, that's like, what can I do? And more often than not, I can find some creative solutions around that.
Yeah.
And a way that I can kind of relate this is, this may be a comment that I have said to you off podcast, and it's funny because I actually mentioned it to a friend just before we started recording, and I said to him how in podcasting, you and I get to talk about things at length, about things that we kind of know about, but it's not until we express ourselves in a format that certain ideas come out of our head that we didn't even know they were there. It's almost like this certain creativity that sort of comes out, and that's what I enjoy. I enjoy these long format chats because, you and I might have a particular idea on something. Like, when we hit record, I said, let's talk about Gap and the Gain. Like, I've listened to it a couple of times. You've not read it yet, but we're almost at an hour now talking about it. And this is what I love, is that there's creativity behind it. There's me thinking. You're saying something, and then you've added something to my definition of it, which is like, oh, okay, I didn't think of it that way, and so I'm thinking about it. I'm telling you about it, and then you go, wait a minute, you're now explaining to me in a different way that I can sort of add this as well.
Yeah.
So creativity and all of this stuff that we gain from it is something that that I value in life, is creativity. It's something that I never really sought out to find. I wasn't thrust upon me. It was opportunistic, and when I saw an opportunity to do something on my own, it wasn't really with with all engines firing. It was kind of like, I'll give this a shot and see how it goes. But as a result of doing it, I found a whole lot of answers about myself, about creativity, about setting goals, about what I love doing, about happiness, about all this sort of stuff. And just the talk of the gap and the gain. In hindsight now, the gap for me just because now it's not because I've failed so many times, but the gap for me isn't such a bad thing anymore. I don't really consider it to be a failure, so to speak. Like, um, I've had a VR business. I had a VR business for like 6 years or so. It
Yeah.
probably I stopped it. I don't know. I think it might have been last year, and there was a lot of time and money invested in that, and it never got to where I thought it would, and I never actually thought of it as a gap, because I think about what I did to get it to where it got to, and it wasn't, a massive company by any means, but I made some really good friends from it. I learned skills that I didn't have prior. I learned a lot about myself as a result of it. And would I do it again if I got the same result? Yeah, like I learned so much from it.
Yeah.
So, if I was to write a book like this, I would just have to call it The Game, because I didn't really see the gap in anything. Like, I don't know. I don't know whether it's just because I'm not saying I'm not driven, but I'm probably a little bit more in tune now with all of the things that I've learnt along the way. Even before a particular idea or a goal is even set, I'm just thankful to be like, okay, you know what? I learned how to communicate with people at all different levels, at all different, pay scales, cold emailing, cold calling, all of these things that are not natural for most people. I
Yeah.
just did it because I had an excuse to do it,
Yeah.
and in time, it's now a skill that I've got,
Mm.
and I learnt it through, trying to start a business, and it failed. It failed in my expectation of it.
Yeah.
And so there's a huge gap there. There's more of a gap than a gain if you were to look at
Yeah.
it on paper. But the gain that I got from it is a lot more than the gap would ever be.
Yeah. It's funny sometimes. People remind you of your failures more than you do. You know what I mean? I remember quite a number of years ago now, I started a creative business, and it was all to do with all within the muscle car scene, and it had a lot of artwork and design and everything in it, and I ran that for about 3 years, and it started off with something that I saw on YouTube, and I thought, oh, that looks pretty cool. I'd like to try that. So I did. And there was a friend of mine. She had bought one of the new Ford Mustangs at that time. And she sent me a photograph, and I said, I'll actually, no, I don't think she sent me a photograph. I think I saw a photograph of her car on Facebook, and I thought, I'm going to do a picture for her with this thing that I was doing. I sent it to her, and she loved it so much. She posted it on Facebook, and there was a lot of people that commented on this thing. I thought, oh, okay. And so I did a few more. A few people asked me, did a few more. I put it on an Etsy store, opened up an Etsy store. I started designing a whole lot of products and everything for it as well, watches, clocks, T-shirts, a whole lot of stuff. And what really took off was the artwork that I'd done for a friend of mine. And, 500 customers later with the artwork. And for me, I'd get up in the morning and I was raring to go every morning. I loved it, this business, and it wasn't anything huge by any means, but it gave me an income the same as what I would be employed by someone else, but I was employed by myself, which was brilliant, working from home, and it really spoke to my values of that freedom and creativity, and really enjoyed what I was doing, and the kind of feedback I was getting from people as well was brilliant. So I had magnificent experience with it, and there was a lot of gain from that as well. The only thing was it didn't speak. In the end, it didn't meet with my expectations in growing. The business didn't grow very much because of the types of products, or maybe the niche I was in. And so it hit a plateau. And so it became a thing of, I was still enjoying doing the work, but it kind of felt like every day was the same. So I thought there's kind of like a bit of a ceiling here too. There's only so much I can do. Like if I'm working 8 hours a day and I'm getting more orders than I can handle, people are going to get pretty disappointed, or I've got to bring more people on. And I really wasn't in the space of wanting to manage people anymore. I did that at my job, and I just wanted to do my own thing. But I thought there's really no avenue for growth. Looking back now, I see there was so many different other opportunities I could have added onto it. But at that time, I decided to kind of close it and move on. I still get orders now from the kind of digital products that I've created. So you still get, residual or passive kind of income from that. So it was all good. But when I speak to some other people that knew I was doing it, I don't know what they had in their mind about what I was doing, because I probably wasn't showing them what I was doing in a business kind of role. It was more my customers knew, but they didn't know. And they kind of looked at it as a failure. And, this dinky little kind of business, that kind of thing, But I think, however big or small it is, if it's meeting your requirements, what you want, and I think that's a success. It didn't bring in $1 million. Maybe other people had that expectation. I didn't have that expectation, but certainly it got to the point where I thought I can't see myself or the business growing anymore. So there's kind of like a dead end here, or a ceiling, and time to move on. But it's interesting how other people see the failures that you don't see it that way, And I think it was all just gain, really, because now if I wanted to open up a similar business, I know every single avenue to do that kind of business, some sort of creative type of business. Yeah, it never leaves you.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think that comes back to that saying that you were saying before. It was it fail and fail fast, or something along those lines? You want to be able to recognize that, and to stop those things from just dragging on. Because once you've kind of wrapped it up, then you can then assess all of the things that you've gained, which, I think the VR company probably ran maybe a year or so longer than it should have. There's probably times where I think I tried to revive it one last time, and in hindsight, I probably should have stopped it there. Like I probably learned all that I could from it. So let's just say of the 7 years, maybe 5 years into it, maybe even 4. I'm not really sure, but being able to fail and fail fast means that you can then start and do something else quicker.
Yeah.
And then learn more things and assess what it is, because it's, it's not really until you stop something, you quit something, or you say you either failed, that you really then get the chance to then go back on it and revisit that time. And that's where you do see the gain. It's hard to measure the gain for something when it's on the skids. Because you don't want to, right? It's a painful thing. And as much as you try and do it, you go, oh wait, maybe there is life back in this. I've just measured backwards, and I've done pretty well. Maybe I should keep going. It's like, no, like just stop it now, wrap it up, then start something else new. So, I can honestly say that everything in business ended life for the most part that that I've stopped or failed or whatever you want to call it as has always had an upside to it, has always had a plus, has always had a, okay, this happened, but as a result of that happening, this happened. And that other thing that happened as a result has always been a positive, has always, you know, put me either on the right path or on a different path, or has presented a whole host of other opportunities. You know, I did some stuff like career wise that I had no business in doing, and I managed to do things that I thought I could never do. And even though I didn't see those things to fruition, some because the passion wasn't there, other times it was because it was going to be too hard or too difficult. Others because, you know, market conditions weren't right. But each time I had started and stopped something, I gained actually quite a lot. You know, it is something about starting something and then stopping it, and then starting something else again and then stopping that. You do get to build a little bit of resilience. You know, obviously, if you're doing things legally, that's fine. But if you're doing this illegally, it's not good. And don't listen to me when I tell you those sorts of things. But you know, in being able to start something and then stopping it and then looking back, and it's like, what did I gain from this? Okay, is that the right industry? Is this the right work? Do I need partners in this, or do I need to do this alone? You know, do I need to become an employee? Okay, well, let's try that. See if that works, and then if that doesn't work, you stop that, and then you do the same thing again. It is always measuring backwards. You know,
Yeah.
you can't measure forwards and go, you know what, I started this business and I wanted to make this much money, and it's never going to happen. Like, I'm a failure. And the rest of the time you're moping around because suddenly someone else has the same idea as you and then they're succeeding. You know, you can't sort of stay in that mindset. And, you know, if anything, that always measure backwards, it does help you from some of the psychological trauma that you'll put yourself through. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not saying that if you do it, it will go immediately, but it does help in some of those thoughts that will come up from time to time. You know, I remember there were times in the VR company where it's like, I do better stuff than these guys. Like, why isn't this company as good? You know, and
Yeah.
then I can then go, well, you know what? Now that I think about it, like, this is where we came from. This is how long they've been around. They've probably done the same thing as well. So if I measure backwards compared to where I was at the start of, I've actually done pretty well, you know.
Yeah.
And it does help just to reel those emotions back in. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, it's not gonna heal them, but it does help at the time when those thoughts pop up. And, you know, as time goes on, those sorts of random thoughts will slowly start to fade, because now I want to become a coach, or I want to do this, or I want to do that, and now I've got other things to put my my focus on. So, you know, the gain, I appreciate it. I know what it is. After talking to you now over an hour about this, it's
Oh,
a lot
wow.
more. Yeah, I know, right? It's a lot more impactful for me now, because I see that the gain is linked to happiness. It's linked to creativity. For certain things, it's almost a double gain, in that, you know, I understand what I could potentially be doing wrong, but then I could find a new skill. And even though this is the second time of me listening through this book, I think I'll listen to it with a bit more of a keen eye. Just, you know, because I did feel initially that it was very, they introduced the concept so quickly that the rest of the book was then just trying to find examples of it. So I did listen to it in a way that was maybe one ear here, one ear listening to something else. But after chatting with you for an over an hour, I think I'm going to have to actually listen to this at 1-to-1 speed and get a little bit more out of it. So thank you for your explanation. So Shane, we have crossed over the 1 hour mark, and I think we should wrap this up now. I did tell you before we recorded that we should actually tell people where to contact us if they ever want to have a chat. So let
Yeah.
me do the first one. So we do have an email address for Grit and Guidance, and that's just hello@gritandguidance.com. If you want to reach out to me for whatever reason and say, you know, thanks for that, or no, you guys are totally wrong, you can email me at Dex, that's DEX, at thedecafnetwork.com. And Shane, where can they get in touch with you?
Awaken Guide 555 at gmail.com.
Okay. You want to repeat that one more time? Oh,
yeah, it's Awaken Guide 555 at gmail.com.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that, Shane.
Thanks, Dex.
Let's wrap this up for now, and I'll chat to you on the next one.
All right, buddy.
See you, mate.
Ya.
Bye.
Bye.